Hey guys, tonight we're stepping softly into the world of ancient Rome. Not the grand chariot racing, Caesar assassinating version you saw in school, but the far more relatable realm of toothaches, squeaky floorboards, and oddly specific mouse-based remedies. Imagine it's just before dawn in a cluttered third-floor flat in a Roman insula. Those slightly alarming, creaky apartment buildings made mostly of timber and hope. You stir in a straw-filled mattress that has seen better centuries, only to be met with a dull, throbbing ache in the left side of your jaw. Congratulations, you're now an ancient Roman with a toothache. And let's be honest, there's not enough wine in the empire to make this fun. The room is dim, lit only by the soft blue-gray light sneaking through the wooden shutters. You can hear the bustle of bakers below, already stoking their ovens. Clay jars rattle slightly as someone walks down the stairs outside your paper-thin wall. Your breath catches as you yawn too wide, and that tooth screams again. You grope for the earthenware cup by your bed. It's full of lukewarm water with yesterday's herbal residue floating like algae. You take a sip, hoping it'll calm your nerves. It does not. Tooth pain wasn't just common in Rome, it was almost guaranteed. Archaeological digs have revealed that Roman skulls often show severe dental wear, abscesses, and cavities, especially among the poor. Sugar hadn't conquered the world yet, but grain-heavy diets filled with grit from poorly milled flour certainly had. And you've been gnawing on too much hard bread and salted cheese, apparently. As you shuffle toward the hallway, your bare feet sting on the cool tile. Somewhere below, someone's already arguing about fish prices. You think about shouting for help, but realize that no one will take a toothache seriously, not when there's a gladiator parade this afternoon. Now here's your reality check. You're in a city of over 1 million people, and dental care involves soot, ash, and occasionally rodent residue. You probably won't survive this. But hey, it's all part of the charm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from a cozy little corner of the world, drop your location in the local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone is listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're now trudging slowly to the communal kitchen space. The smell of yesterday's lentils clings to the walls. Your roommate, Cassius, is already up and poking something in a clay pot with a bit too much curiosity. He notices your swollen jaw and gives a slow nod. Mouse time, he says, only half joking. Because, yes, mice. Small, common, and weirdly medicinal in the Roman mind. Roasted mouses, specifically, was a folk remedy for aching teeth. The process: burn it to a crisp, grind it up, and apply it directly to the affected gum. It's not exactly Colgate, but desperate times, right? You grumble a reply and wrap yourself in a threadbare toga. Outside, the street is starting to buzz: merchants hawking figs, children chasing chickens, and somewhere, someone playing a flute off key. You head toward the market, your mind foggy from the pain. Historians still argue whether the mouse remedy actually had any basis in pharmacology, or if it was just another example of Rome's love for elaborate, oddly specific cures. Some suggest that carbonized mouse remains may have contained mild antiseptic properties. Others believe it was all a placebo. If anything can distract you from a toothache, it's rubbing ground rodent on your face. A whisper of cool wind brushes your cheek as you step into the shadowy alley behind the market. It smells of olive oil, sweat, and crushed herbs. An elderly vendor, Marcia, waves you over. "Tooth pain?" she asks, already rummaging under her table. You nod, bracing yourself. She pulls out a small bundle wrapped in waxed linen. Inside, one singed mouse already blackened and crumbly. You blink. "Two sestertii," she says matter-of-factly. You hand it over. She throws in a twig of thyme as a bonus for flavor, she jokes, though you're not sure if she means culinary or spiritual. On the way back home, the weight of the mouse in your hand is oddly comforting. Or maybe it's just the promise that relief, however questionable, is near. You reach your apartment and sit by the tiny window, watching pigeons strut across the neighboring roof tiles. The mouse crumbles easily between your fingers, and the smell is surprisingly tolerable. You dab it carefully onto your swollen gum. It's gritty, warm, and faintly nutty. Not that it helps much. But the ritual, the act of doing something, brings the first flicker of calm. You lean back and close your eyes. The pain is still there, pulsing like a slow drum beat. But the city noise has softened. The sun has risen a little higher, and for a brief moment, the ancient world doesn't seem quite so harsh. By midday, your jaw is still pulsing, but now it's joined by a mild headache and a strange craving for cheese. Perhaps it's a side effect of mouse powder, or maybe you're just hungry. Either way, it's clear the mouse remedy didn't quite work its magic. So what's next? You make your way through the crowded alley again, the sounds of Rome at full volume. A boy chases a runaway cart. Someone yells about stolen dates. Somewhere, a donkey brays with startling intensity, as if offended by the lack of personal space. You navigate this chaos with a hand pressed to your cheek, dodging amphorae and gossip in equal measure. You're heading toward one of the more peculiar corners of Roman street life, the herb market, known for both its pungent aroma and its promise of obscure solutions. You pass rows of dried roots, fragrant oils, and ominously unlabeled jars. Behind one of them is an old man with a face like a fig, wrinkled, sweet, but possibly dangerous. Bad tooth? He asks before you can speak. Either he's a mind reader or you look that miserable. You nod. Have you tried roasted leeks, boiled in vinegar, or perhaps a bit of ash from burnt leather sandals? You stare, trying not to show judgment. But your silence only encourages him. Or he says, leaning in like he's about to reveal Caesar's credit score, the juice of mashed beetles. Very effective. Especially on odd-numbered days. You make a polite noise of interest and pretend to examine a cluster of dried dandelion roots. These remedies may sound strange, but Roman medicine was an eclectic blend of observation, superstition, and a whole lot of experimentation. Mice weren't even the strangest thing on offer. Take wasps, for example. Ground-up wasp nests mixed with crushed herbs were sometimes recommended for tooth pain. Why? Because the sting of a wasp, when applied in just the right way, was thought to numb the nerves. Pain versus pain, essentially. Historians still argue whether any of these methods were passed down based on genuine empirical results, or just the desperate need for anything to believe in. After all, if your neighbor swore by onion compresses and he could still chew olives with a grin, who were you to question it? The vendor offers you a blend dried marjoram, powdered myrrh, and a pinch of burned parchment. He wraps it neatly in linen and tells you to inhale with purpose. You're not sure what that means, but you nod like a seasoned philosopher. Back in your room, you prepare the mixture as instructed. You light a tiny coal from the communal fire pit, sprinkle the blend onto it, and lean in. The smoke curls into your nostrils, earthy, spicy, oddly calming. It doesn't cure the toothache, but it does make your mind wander to pleasant places. Distant hills, quiet vineyards, and those weirdly serene Roman mosaics of dolphins leaping forever into the sky. Still, the pain remains. Just slightly fuzzier now. You decide to lie down and let your brain drift. But Cassius barges in, carrying a small package and looking far too smug. "Remember my cousin," he says, not waiting for you to answer. He's a scribe for a retired centurion, and he swears by another mouse method, but not roasted. Pickled. Your eyebrows try to raise in protest, but your jaw reminds them who's boss. Cassius unwraps the bundle. Inside is a tiny jar of briny liquid, with a grayish little mouse floating peacefully like it's had a better afterlife than most emperors. "You don't eat it," he says, waving a hand. "You just nibble the tip and dab the juice. You'd scream if it didn't hurt so much, but you let him apply a few drops. Salty, slightly tangy, and bizarrely refreshing." Roman folk medicine wasn't shy about ingredients. Mice, snakes, even bits of crushed gemstone found their way into treatments. The reasoning: everything in nature had some kind of essence or property that could balance your humors. Those mystical bodily fluids believed to govern your health. Too much black bile? Here, chew this frog. Your bile will fall right back in line. There was even a school of thought that mice were effective because they were small, fast and prolific qualities thought to symbolically counter slow, throbbing pain. Don't ask why. Symbolism and logic rarely dated in ancient Rome. The room smells like pickles and burned parchment now, which somehow isn't the worst scent combo you've encountered in this building. You sit quietly as the brine dries on your gum. Outside, the sun shifts and the city hum slows just slightly. The market winds down, and the stray cats begin their nightly rounds. The pain hasn't left, but it has mellowed. It's no longer a soldier marching across your skull, more like a half-asleep bureaucrat dragging his feet. You lean back on the floor cushions and exhale. Mice may not be magic, but in a world of questionable cures, they're as good a placebo as any. And in ancient Rome, a good placebo could mean the difference between a night of agony and a night of tolerable discomfort with vaguely therapeutic mouse juice. Somewhere upstairs, someone is practicing the lyre, and the notes fall like soft footsteps. You close your eyes and wonder how many other Romans are lying in their beds tonight, cradling aching jaws and whispering to jars of pickled rodents. You wake, not because the pain is gone, but because someone in the apartment above you has dropped what sounds like a ceramic basin filled with bricks. A perfectly Roman way to start the next phase of your day. The ache in your jaw has settled into a dull companion now. It's not screaming anymore, just tapping politely every few minutes like an insistent guest at your temple. You groan, roll off your sleeping mat, and stretch your arms overhead, listening to the soft pop of your back. You decide to distract yourself by taking in your surroundings. You live in an insula, after all, Rome's answer to the modern apartment complex. Except instead of drywall and elevators, think rickety wooden beams, smoky walls, and neighbors whose entire lives you can hear through cracks in the plaster. As you shuffle to the window, you glance around your space. There's a chipped clay jug on the table, half filled with yesterday's barley soup. A bronze mirror, slightly warped, leans against a wall where the plaster has flaked to reveal bare brick. A worn sandal lies lonely in the corner, its twin having vanished weeks ago in what you suspect was a tragic laundry accident. The room smells of last night's oil lamp, mixed with a hint of thyme and cat. You suspect that Cassius has been using your bed as a nap spot again, based on the additional hairs. Living in a Roman insula is not for the faint of heart. If you're wealthy, you might get a lower floor unit with decent ventilation and access to a shared latrine that isn't entirely terrifying. But you live on the third floor, which means lots of stairs and a distinct sense that the whole building might lean slightly to the left. You hear the rhythmic clank of water being drawn from the cistern down below. That reminds you it's time for your daily rinse. Roman hygiene wasn't as pristine as marble statues would have you believe. Sure, there were public baths, but for daily washing, many people settled for a cloth and some cold water from a shared jug. You strip off your tunic gently, thanks to the sensitive jaw, and use a small sponge to splash water over your face and chest. As the cold water hits your skin, you shiver. The sensation is surprisingly invigorating. You pause to stare at the dark circle under your left eye, courtesy of your nocturnal dental misery and the faint swelling of your jaw. Attractive. Cassius pokes his head in. You smell better, he says. Not exactly a compliment. Thanks, you mumble, half a smile curling on the good side of your face. He sits on the floor and picks at a piece of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. Did you know my aunt swears by warm sheep milk for toothaches? He says between chews. She lets it sit in the sun until it smells like the gods disapprove, then dabs it on the gums. You groan. Still, the conversation is distracting. And you remember that Roman domestic life wasn't all mice and vinegar. It was family, noise, smells, routine. It was neighbors poking their heads in, merchants shouting downstairs, and cats stealing dried fish when no one was looking. You head to the small hearth in the corner of the kitchen space. It's shared between 4 families, which means there are always traces of mysterious stews stuck to the rim. You reheat some lentils with a splash of oil, then crush in a few herbs from your dwindling stash. You chew slowly, favoring the non-screaming side of your mouth. The lentils are soft enough. Barely. As you eat, you notice a neighbor, a wiry woman named Livia, balancing a water jug on her head as she returns from the bathhouse. She nods at you through the open window and says, "Still hurting?" You nod. Try pressing warm bread to your cheek. It worked for my son when he cracked a molar on a date seed. Bread compresses. Pickled mice. Wasp nest powder. It's almost poetic how pain in Rome comes with a buffet of bizarre responses. Historians still argue whether the endless folk solutions of Roman domestic life were signs of medical resourcefulness or simply acts of collective hope. Some remedies seem based in common sense, others, like warm sheep milk left in the sun, seem more like dares. You finish your lentils and wipe your mouth with the corner of your tunic. Cassius leans back and points to the ceiling. Think the people above us are still using that honey on the feet remedy? You raise an eyebrow. It's for insomnia, he explains. Rub honey on your soles, wrap them in cabbage, then go to bed upside down. You blink. Don't knock it, he says, shrugging. Apparently it draws out all the bad dreams. And just like that, your tooth doesn't feel quite so tragic. Because at least you're not wrapped in salad and sleeping like a bat. Outside, the light changes again. Shadows stretch across the cobbled street, and a group of children begin playing with hoops made of old barrel rings. One of them shrieks in laughter, then trips into a merchant's display of lemons. The vendor curses in Latin that would make a senator blush. You lean on the windowsill, pressing your still sore cheek against the cool stone. It feels bearable. not fixed but dulled, wrapped in a strange way in the domestic hum of your Roman life. You close your eyes just for a moment, letting the warmth of the late afternoon wrap around you, letting the city's endless motion rock you gently, not to sleep yet, but closer. You leave the apartment with your jaw still humming like a low drum and your mind turning toward a higher hope, an actual healer. Not your neighbor's cousin, not a pickled mouse vendor, but someone who claims the title of medicus with a straight face and enough herbs to start a forest fire. The streets are busier now. Laundry hangs between buildings like half-hearted flags of surrender. A stray dog weaves through the crowd, entirely unbothered by its status as the cleanest creature on the street. You wrap your cloak tighter and walk past a butcher who's tossing entrails into the gutter meat. In Rome is an interactive experience. You're heading toward a domus near the forum where a healer named Faustus practices. You've heard mixed things. Some say he once stitched up a senator's son using only a bronze needle and a prayer. Others say he once mistook a bee sting for demonic possession and tried to exorcise it with incense and aggressive clapping. Still, desperate teeth call for desperate measures. You arrive at a modest doorway flanked by potted lavender. A decent sign lavender means either someone cares about healing or someone just hates flies. Inside, Faustus greets you while grinding something with a pestle. The scent of chamomile and burnt rosemary hovers in the air like a sleepy fog. He gestures for you to sit on a stool that wobbles ominously. Open, he says, peering into your mouth with the seriousness of a man studying a map of enemy territory. Ah, yes, see. Swelling of the upper molar. Classic. He turns away to stir a pot of honey, vinegar, and something that looks suspiciously like mashed figs. Most toothaches, he says as he works, are the fault of disordered humors. Possibly an imbalance of black bile. Or perhaps the moon. You nod. The moon does seem suspicious lately. Faustus begins dabbing the mixture onto a rag, then gently presses it to your jaw. The warmth is soothing, the honey clings, and the fig makes you oddly hungry. Roman medicine was a tapestry of overlapping influences: Greek theory, Etruscan superstition, Egyptian rituals, and plain old Roman practicality. Physicians like Faustus often walked a strange line between healer and mystic. Some had formal training, others had enthusiasm. As Faustus adjusts the compress, he mumbles a brief invocation to Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. You're not sure if it's habit or insurance. Now, he says, rummaging through a basket, you'll also want to chew on this. He hands you a twig, licorice root, sweet and numbing. Just don't chew too hard. You bite down gently and feel a faint tingling on your tongue. Whether it's placebo or potion, you're not complaining. As you sit, he tells you a story about a soldier who returned from Britannia with half his teeth shattered from biting frozen oatcakes. He swore by garlic and ash, Faustus says. Smelled like a battlefield, but his pain eased. Historians still argue whether these herbal mixtures were developed through empirical testing or just repeated guesses dressed up as wisdom. Some ingredients had antiseptic or anti-inflammatory properties like myrrh or frankincense, but they were often bundled with rituals involving chanting, moon phases, or animal sacrifices. Faustus gives you a small pouch filled with dried rose petals, thyme, and a sliver of cinnamon. Sleep with this under your pillow, he says. If the pain doesn't leave, the spirits might. You pay him 3 sestertii and nod solemnly. You won't tell him that you once saw Cassius use cinnamon to deodorize his sandals. The sun is setting as you step back onto the street. The sky above Rome turns to gold, then rust, then plum. Torches flicker to life along doorways. Somewhere nearby, a musician plays a slow melody on the panpipes. The world softens. You return home and boil water to make a tea with the herbs Faustus gave you. As it steeps, the scent fills your room, floral and sharp, a little like your grandmother's perfume if she moonlighted as a potion maker. You sip slowly, letting the warmth ease the ache from the inside. Cassius is sprawled on the floor, half asleep, a small scroll covering his face. Did the god of teeth fix you? He mumbles. You consider the question. Not fixed, but distracted. He grunts. Close enough. You lie back, cradling the compress Faustus gave you, and breathe in the scent of thyme. You feel the weight of the day settle over your body, not heavy, just present. Like a thick blanket that says, you did your best. You tried the mouse. You tried the healer. You haven't cried in public. Good job. Through the window, you hear footsteps fade. Doors close. And somewhere, a woman sings to her child in a lullaby older than most gods. You close your eyes and drift, not into sleep, but into that warm, humming space before it. The city cradles you. The pain hums softly, but it no longer owns you. By the time the first birds start their confused pre-dawn chirping, you're already awake, clutching your cheek like it owes you money. Whatever relief Faustus's potion brought has faded, replaced by the familiar, pulsating reminder that your molar is staging a mutiny. You sigh, sit up slowly, and listen to the apartment creak with the weight of another Roman morning. Cassius snores softly in the corner, completely oblivious to the dental crisis unfolding just a few feet away. There's only one thing left to try before you start praying to every god from Jupiter to that weird one with the snake arms, the apothecarius. Rome's apothecaries were not your average shopkeepers. These were the proud mixers of potions, grinders of roots, and keepers of secrets. They were half scientist, half hedge wizard, and always a little too enthusiastic about beetle shells. You wrap yourself in your cloak and descend the stairs. The steps groan underfoot as you descend past arguing neighbors and the familiar smell of someone boiling cabbage too early in the day. The apothecary shop is a squat building tucked between a shrine to Mercury and a bakery that always smells better than it delivers. A small bell chimes as you enter, and you're immediately hit by a wall of scent lavender, vinegar, wet stone, and something faintly smoky. The man behind the counter looks up with the slow, knowing nod of someone who's seen far too many people with mysterious aches. "Tooth?" he asks. You nod. He doesn't flinch. He just turns and starts pulling jars off shelves. Ground laurel leaves, powdered sage, dried chrysanthemum petals, and of course, something in a jar with a drawing of a mouse on it. "I have options," he says, lining them up like soldiers. "This one is a poultice with onion skins and barley paste. This one is a powder to be blown into the mouth with a hollow reed. This," he pauses dramatically, "is mouse marrow mixed with wine and fennel oil." You stare. "Don't worry, it's aged," he adds, as if that helps. You settle on the barley onion poultice, which at least sounds like something edible rather than part of a punishment. As he mixes it for you, he talks. "You know, in Alexandria, they sometimes use salt-soaked wool. In Gaul, they chew tree resin. And in Hispania, there's a tribe that believes in pressing hot pebbles against the cheek until the pain runs away." Historians still argue whether the apothecaries of Rome were true practitioners of science or just glorified storytellers with access to rare weeds. But one thing is clear, they were good at selling certainty. You hand over your coins and leave with a warm cloth parcel that smells like it could cure a mule's hoof, let alone a molar. Back at home, Cassius is awake, poking at a bowl of olives with yesterday's bread. "Any luck?" You grunt, place the poultice over your cheek, and sink down onto the cushion by the window. The heat seeps into your skin. The onion smell makes your eyes sting a little, but it's not unpleasant. Cassius takes a bite of bread and says around a mouthful, "You know, my uncle once went to a healer who told him his toothache was caused by evil spirits in his stomach." You raise an eyebrow. "So he fasted for 3 days and vomited into a shrine. Felt better after." You close your eyes and wonder if your own stomach ghosts are involved. At this point, you're not ruling anything out. The room fills with silence again, comforting, not empty. The kind of silence that holds warmth, the rustle of linen, the creak of wood, the distant call of a fishmonger. You drift for a moment, not quite awake, not quite dreaming. In this state, everything feels suspended. Your cheek tingles. Your breathing slows. The pain hasn't disappeared, but it's shrinking, maybe from the poultice, or maybe from the simple relief of doing something. Because that's what so much of Roman medicine was, doing something. Applying, grinding, chanting, chewing ritual, layered on habit, layered on a whisper of belief. And here you are, 2,000 years later, in a linen tunic with onion paste on your jaw and an irrational fear of mouse-based therapy. Cassius mutters something about going to the forum later. You nod, letting his voice drift over you like the first yawn of dusk. The city beyond your window pulses with life horns, hooves, vendors, arguments about fish quality. But inside you are still, swaddled in smell, story, and strangely warm barley paste. You can feel your body softening, surrendering to the moment. The throb of the tooth fades into the background, just another part of you, no longer the enemy. You let your head tilt back. The world tilts with it. The pain, while not gone, has now settled into the background like an annoying flute player at a dinner party, still there, but easy enough to ignore if you focus on anything else. So, with the onion barley poultice cooling on your cheek and Cassius humming tunelessly beside you, you let your thoughts wander to those with more luxurious problems. Toothaches among the Roman elite were a different kind of misery, still miserable, of course, but with fancier cushions and more marble statues judging you while you suffered. Cassius tells you about his cousin's friend's employer because Roman gossip always comes in at least 3 degrees of separation, who works as a chamber slave in the domus of a senator named Gaius Marcellinus. Apparently, the senator has been plagued by tooth pain for weeks now. The difference? Instead of burnt mice and barley paste, he's been treated with saffron poultices, Egyptian myrrh, and what Cassius describes only as an absurdly large emerald pressed to his face for balance. You raise your eyebrows, which hurts more than expected. But it's true, the Roman elite, despite their wealth, weren't spared the curse of dental doom. In fact, some of their remedies were even more absurd. According to Pliny, the elder Rome's favorite fact hoarder, aristocrats often used crushed pearls, gold powder, and even coral in their dental preparations. Not because it worked, no one really believed gold soothed inflamed nerve, but because it was expensive. And if you couldn't cure your pain, you could at least flaunt it. In one satirical poem, a wealthy Roman matron is said to have smeared imported cinnamon oil on her teeth, while sipping imported date wine through a hollow reed to avoid touching her aching molars. This naturally was followed by a visit from a Greek physician who recommended bleeding her elbows to redirect the pain. Makes perfect sense. Historians still argue whether such elite treatments had any physiological effect, or if they served more as psychological pageantry, a way to feel in control of an ailment that no amount of coin could truly conquer. Rich or poor, enamel has its limits. Curious now, you convince Cassius to escort you on a short walk past the villa district, not to snoop, of course, but to observe. And if a servant just happens to be shouting about someone's swollen cheek, well, who are you to ignore such a thing? The domus homes of Rome's wealthy are a world apart from your insula. Grand columns, fountains with vaguely smug cupids, floor mosaics that look like they were designed by artists who'd never seen dirt. You pass by one open atrium and glimpse a reclining woman having what appears to be a paste made of lavender. And wait, is that boiled goose fat? Dabbed delicately onto her jaw. That's Domitia, Cassius whispers. Her husband imports ink for scrolls. Apparently her pain gets worse when Mercury is in retrograde. You blink slowly. What's Mercury? Cassius shrugs. A planet, a god, a metal, all three. You stand there a moment, watching Domitia suffer beautifully. She winces behind a gold-threaded veil, while a servant gently fans her with a palm leaf. Meanwhile, your own cheek is still wrapped in a slightly sticky strip of linen that smells like lunch. Back home, you sink down again and reflect. The poor use pickled rodents and herbal fumes. The rich use sapphires and imported oils. But no one, it seems, can escape the steady democratic cruelty of a bad tooth. There is something oddly comforting in that. You picture a young Caesar chewing too hard on a fig and regretting everything. Or a stoic philosopher trying to ponder life's deepest truths while applying sage ash to his aching gums. Pain is a great equalizer. The day stretches long and golden outside. You hear the clip-clop of a mule cart, the rhythmic slap of laundry against stone, and someone arguing about lentils in the alley. It's Rome as usual. Cassius returns from a short trip to the bakery with 2 fresh rolls, one of which he kindly softens in broth for you. You chew it slowly, gingerly, on the good side of your mouth. It's still a bit crunchy, the kind of crunch that makes your jaw twitch. But you smile anyway. Because if a Roman senator can sit in a marble bathtub with crushed pearls on his gums and still look miserable, you're doing okay. You've got broth-dipped bread, a window view, and the unshakable satisfaction of not rubbing goose fat on your face. That's a win. Outside, the sun begins to dip again, casting the city in warm bronze and deepening shadows. Smoke from nearby cook fires curls into the air, mingling with the scent of roasted garlic and citrus peel. You shift in your seat, letting your head rest against the wall, the linen strip falling gently onto your shoulder. The pulse in your jaw is there, faint but steady, like a metronome slowing down for the evening. And you wonder just for a second if somewhere across the city, a senator is doing the same, only with better wine. Later that evening, as the streets begin to quiet and the oil lamps flicker to life in windows across the city, you find yourself pondering a question that would never cross your mind if your tooth weren't currently rebelling. What did the Romans actually use as toothpaste? Because clearly whatever they did use, it wasn't enough. You shuffle over to the small clay shelf by the hearth, where your personal grooming supplies live: a modest wooden comb, a worn strip of linen that passes for a towel, and a curious lump in a small jar, your own homemade dentifricium, the Roman version of toothpaste. You lift the lid and instantly regret it. The smell is part ash, part vinegar, and all regret. You recall the ingredients Cassius helped you mash together last week: crushed oyster shells, a pinch of charcoal, and ground up deer antler. Some recipes call for bones, some for burnt bread crusts, and the fancier ones even include powdered pumice. The idea was simple: scrub the plaque away with something just abrasive enough to make you question your life choices. You dab a bit onto your finger and gently run it over your good teeth. The grit is immediate, like chewing sand at the beach. But there's also a weirdly satisfying freshness, almost like menthol but Roman style. For your aching molar, though, it's a hard no. One wrong move with that oyster grit, and you'll be howling like a gladiator with a stubbed toe. So you settle for rinsing with lukewarm vinegar water instead, which honestly just tastes like salad dressing for people who've given up. The Romans were meticulous about personal grooming, at least when it came to appearances. They oiled their skin, styled their hair, and yes, tried to keep their teeth presentable. Even soldiers on campaign carried tooth cleaning tools, often made from bronze or bone. The misericordia, a narrow metal pick, was used not just to clean between the teeth, but also, some say, to scrape away decay. Gently. Ideally. Historians still argue whether these oral hygiene efforts actually prevented much decay or just made people feel better about the inevitable. After all, even the best oyster shell paste won't save you if your bread is filled with stone-ground grit and your idea of dessert is fermented fish sauce. Cassius, of course, has his own ideas. I've heard, he says, lounging across your sleeping mat like a cat who pays rent, that in the provinces they chew mint leaves every morning. The Gauls even use pine bark. You raise an eyebrow. That sounds splintery. Everything's splintery if you chew hard enough. He grins, revealing a perfectly crooked row of teeth. You wonder if he just doesn't feel pain the same way as other people, or if his teeth are made of bronze. Outside, the sound of sandals on cobblestones becomes less frequent. A lull descends, as if the city is collectively preparing for the hush of night. You light a tiny oil lamp with a flick of flint and breathe in the faint smell of olive soot. The flame dances gently, casting gold shadows on the wall. You dip your rag into the vinegar again and hold it to your cheek, trying to numb the stubborn ache that settled back in now that the poultice's warmth has faded. There's a part of you that envies the people who claim to have found actual relief, those who swear by a specific blend of rose oil and salt, or a sacred chant taught to them by a wandering priest. But then again, Roman medicine was as much about belief as biology. Many Romans believed that certain ingredients carried divine properties. Ashes from the temple fires of Vesta were considered potent for healing. Some whispered that fig leaves plucked during a full moon could draw out pain. Even spitting through a bronze ring while chanting the name of a minor river god had its believers. You haven't tried that one. Yet, Cassius sighs dramatically. You could always pray to Cloacina, goddess of sewers. She hears all kinds of pain. You blink. What does she have to do with my mouth? He shrugs. Maybe the pain just needs a way out. You groan. But not from the joke. Okay, partly from the joke. You decide to call it a night and stretch out on your sleeping mat. The air is cool now, scented faintly with street dust and night jasmine drifting in through the open window. As you lie there, the pain comes in waves, not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady. Predictable, like the rhythm of a drum slowly fading as a festival ends. And as you drift towards sleep, you think about all the mouths in Rome, rich and poor, young and old, dealing with the same quiet agony. Grinding herbs, chanting to obscure gods, blowing powders into each other's faces with hollow reeds. Somewhere out there, another Roman is swishing vinegar and muttering about beetle spirits. And somehow, that makes you feel less alone. The flame flickers lower. Your eyelids grow heavy. The vinegar sting on your lips fades into nothing. And your thoughts drift like smoke through the quiet streets of the empire. Morning returns like a stubborn tax collector, early, persistent, and not particularly welcome. Your eyes flutter open to the dim gray light that filters through the shutters. And almost immediately, the familiar throb in your jaw returns to say, good morning. You don't even sigh anymore. At this point, it's less a sharp pain and more a deeply personal acquaintance, a roommate you didn't ask for and can't quite get rid of. You splash your face with cold water and think, maybe today's the day. The day you stumble upon that perfect remedy, or at least a new distraction. Today, your destination is the public baths, not just for hygiene, though the smell of your onion barley bandage might be a strong motivator. You're going because you've heard that bathhouses aren't only for getting clean, they're for gossip, odd advice, and the kinds of whispered cures that doctors never write down. Cassius tags along, always happy for an excuse to sit in steam and judge people's sandals. The thermi looms like a temple to sweat. Grand columns, the sound of rushing water, and a faint hum of voices echoing through stone corridors. You pay your entrance fee, strip down, and store your cloak in a woven basket. The air is thick with heat and eucalyptus. You move slowly through the sequence apoditarium changing room, tepidarium warm room, then into the caldarium, the hot room where the steam clings to your skin and thoughts unravel like wool in hot water. As you lower yourself into the shallow pool, the warmth seeps into your jaw. You groan, but in a good way this time. An older man seated nearby hears the noise and nods knowingly. Toothache? He asks. You nod because at this point, everyone knows. It's basically your identity. He leans in conspiratorially. There's a trick my grandmother used: rub mashed garlic mixed with goat fat on your gums. Then sleep with your feet facing east. Cassius snorts. Does it work? The man shrugs. Only if the moon's waning. You smile with the good side of your mouth. This is what the baths are for, not just cleansing, but exchanging tales of peculiar fixes. One man swears by saltwater gargles. Another recommends chewing raw fig stems. A third insists on whispering a specific line of Virgil 3 times before bed. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were more medical hub or rumor mill. But there's no doubt that half the treatments that traveled across Rome did so through whispers in steam rooms. The thermi were where soldiers, bakers, senators, and swindlers all melted together, and along with their sweat, their secrets spilled. A young man with unusually white teeth offers his personal solution: rinsing with vinegar, followed by an application of blessed oil given by a priest in Ostia. When you ask what made the oil blessed, he shrugs. He said it was near a lightning strike once. You begin to wonder if lightning-fried olive oil is something you could market. After soaking until your fingers wrinkle like figs left in the sun, you head to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. Cassius dares you to dunk your head. You decline, protectively cupping your jaw like a precious amphora. Once you're dried and redressed, you feel better. Not healed, not cured, but refreshed in that deeply Roman way. Cleaner, warmer, and somehow more connected to the thousands of others who've sweated through pain before you. As you exit the bathhouse, you feel a bit lighter. Not because the pain is gone, it's still there, reminding you with every step, but because you've joined a long lineage of sufferers turned storytellers. You and Cassius stop at a street vendor for a snack. He orders honeyed dates. You, ever cautious, opt for soft cheese wrapped in a fig leaf. You take small bites, letting the creamy texture melt in your mouth before it can offend your tooth. Around you, Rome bustles. A flute player wobbles through a tune. A fishmonger yells about eels so fresh they haven't noticed they're dead yet. Children play with hoops made from broken barrel rings. You find yourself smiling, even laughing a little. Because in the midst of this noisy, dusty, wonderfully chaotic empire, even a throbbing tooth can't keep you from savoring the ridiculous. Cassius elbows you. You know what would fix your tooth? You raise a brow. He grins. A trip to the countryside. Less stress. Fewer shouting vendors. More goats. You shake your head, but the idea lingers. Maybe a change of air. Maybe different mice. As the sun tilts westward and the shadow of the basilica creeps across the street, you realize that the ache has dulled again. Sweat, steam, and laughter combining into a kind of temporary remedy. No miracle. No cure. But sometimes that's enough. You begin walking home, cloak wrapped loose, the city's rhythm humming beneath your feet. Your jaw pulses gently, like the distant beat of a drum, but for now, you can dance to it. You return to your apartment just as the golden hue of late afternoon paints the walls with lazy warmth. The pain in your jaw simmers quietly, like a pot set to low heat, no longer boiling over, but never quite still. It's dinner time. And therein lies the next Roman challenge: how to enjoy a meal when your mouth feels like it's being haunted by an angry spirit with a tiny hammer. Cassius is already at work, arranging a modest spread on a chipped wooden table. Olives, flatbread, a little salted fish, and a bowl of lentils that looks promisingly soft. He holds up a cracked amphora. Mulsum, he offers a mixture of wine and honey. You nod. If nothing else, it'll numb the pain or your decision-making, whichever comes first. You lower yourself onto a cushion with theatrical caution, as if you're 90 and made of baked clay. Cassius dips a corner of bread into the lentils and takes a bite. You, on the other hand, study the bowl as if it might bite you. Roman meals, especially for the working class, were simple. Porridge, beans, boiled vegetables, and sometimes, if fortune smiled, a bit of cheese or dried meat. For the elite, dinner could be a performance exotic birds, flaming sauces, and stuffed dormice. But for you, dinner is damage control. You try the lentils first. They're warm, earthy, and forgiving to chew. Encourage, you dare a softened olive. That's when the molar reminds you who's in charge. You make a strangled noise. Cassius looks up. Still bad? You nod and reach for your cup. The mulsum hits your tongue, sweet, spiced, with a subtle tang of wine that's been stored just slightly too long. It soothes in a way no herb or mouse ever did. You press the cool cup to your cheek and sigh. Over dinner, the conversation drifts. You and Cassius discuss the usual temple taxes, the odd smell in the stairwell, the neighbor's mysterious new tunic that everyone suspects was stolen from a laundry line in Trastevere. Halfway through the meal, a noise outside draws your attention, the call of a street poet, performing for coins. His voice is melodic, and for a moment, you forget your aching mouth entirely. He recites a passage from Horace, something about savoring small pleasures and letting go of pain not worth keeping. You smirk. Horace never had to eat around a molar ready to erupt. Still, it's strangely appropriate. Cassius laughs mid-bite, having misjudged a pit in his olive. I don't know how anyone has teeth past the age of 30, he mutters. You agree. Between the stone-laced bread, the vinegary pickles, and the general lack of toothbrushes with soft bristles, Roman teeth are not built to last. And yet, life goes on. Historians still argue whether dental decay was more rampant among the poor due to tougher diets or among the rich due to indulgent, sticky treats. But regardless of class, the Roman dinner table was a battlefield of chewing, improvisation, and prayers for soft bread. You finish your meal slowly, carefully, your molar throbbing just enough to remind you it's still there. You make a note to thank Faustus again. His strange paste may not have cured you, but it's made the evening bearable. That's no small feat in a world with no Novocaine. Later, as the plates are cleared and the wine runs low, Cassius sets down his cup and says, You ever think about becoming a vegetarian? You stare. Less chewing, he explains. Also fewer bones. You consider it. Then remember the dried figs you tried last week that nearly took out your bicuspid. No, you say. The stars begin to prick the darkening sky. Across the city, the sounds of dinner fade and are replaced by laughter, liars, and the occasional neighbor arguing about stolen chickens. You step onto the balcony, or more accurately, a small platform that feels like it might detach from the building. In a strong wind and breathe in the cooling air. Rome glows beneath you. The scent of roasting garlic, burning oil, and early autumn leaves drifts up from the streets. Your tooth still aches, yes, but the city's alive. And in its chaos, there's comfort. You close your eyes. Behind your lids, the pain pulses. But it's quieter now. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the warmth of the lentils. Or maybe it's the sense that tomorrow someone else will suggest a completely useless but wonderfully hopeful cure. For now, you'll take it. You step back inside, wrap your linen tighter, and lie down on your mat. Cassius mumbles something in his sleep about cheese and lions. You smile, carefully. The oil lamp flickers. The city exhales. And you, with your sore tooth and full belly, let the night carry you gently forward. You don't remember falling asleep, but you do remember the dream you were arguing with a goat about proper dental care. The goat had surprisingly good Latin and insisted that chewing pebbles was perfectly reasonable. You, meanwhile, were defending the merits of roasted barley poultices. You wake up to the soft light of dawn, your face, half pressed into your sleeping mat, and your jaw making itself known again, like a neighbor tapping on the wall just to remind you they exist. This time, you're done with herbs and mice and vinegar. Today, you're going to do what any self-respecting Roman would do when they've tried everything else: find someone to rip the tooth out. Enter the tonsor, Rome's multi-talented barber surgeon. You've passed his shop 100 times, tucked just off a side street near the butcher's row. He shaves beards, cuts hair, and, if you're brave or desperate, offers minor surgical procedures, which include tooth extractions performed with the delicacy of a blacksmith with a personal grudge. Cassius doesn't come with you this time. He mutters something about minding the stairs and not wanting to hear any screaming before breakfast. Fair enough. The tonsor's shop is small, warm, and filled with the smell of oil, soap, and something vaguely metallic. The man himself, Florus, is thick-armed, sunburned, and smiling in a way that suggests he enjoys his work a little too much. Toothache? He asks, already reaching for his tools. You nod and your stomach drops a little as he lays out the options, a pair of iron tongs, some waxed linen for biting, and a thin cord of twine that you really don't want to ask about. It's loose, he asks, poking your gums with a stick that might once have been part of a chisel. You wince. That's a yes, he nods. Then it'll come out easy. Historians still argue whether easy in Roman surgical terms meant efficient or just quickly traumatic. Because anesthesia, you may have guessed, does not exist. What you do have is a generous amount of wine, a cushion to squeeze, and a curtain to muffle your howling so the next customer doesn't change their mind. Florist gives you the wine first, strong stuff, almost syrupy. You drink, then drink again. By the third gulp, your mouth is pleasantly numb, and your brain is drifting towards something resembling courage. The barber has you sit in a worn wooden chair. Tilt your head back, he says gently. Try not to flinch. Try not to flinch. As if that's possible when an ex-legionnaire with forceps is approaching your face. You bite the linen cloth and squeeze the cushion until it squeaks. Then he begins. The pain isn't the worst part. It's the pressure, the tugging, the jarring sensation of something being dislodged from your very skull. And then pop, a sudden grotesque release, and then an emptiness. Your whole head feels lighter. As a fousier, also very, very dizzy. Florist drops the tooth into a ceramic bowl with a wet clink. Got it, he says proudly. Nice one too. No wonder it hurt. You can barely speak. You just slump sideways, feeling like you've survived a minor battle and won the prize of not having that particular molar anymore. The barber hands you a cloth soaked in wine and tells you to bite down. It'll bleed. That's normal. Try not to eat anything tougher than grapes for a few days. He grins and gestures toward a bowl of grapes. You pay him with a shaking hand and stumble back into the street, dazed, sweaty, and strangely euphoric. Because the pain is gone. The hole in your mouth throbs, yes, but it's a new pain, a clean, healing pain, not the constant grinding, nerve-shooting misery you've been living with. You feel like a new person. A toothless, wobbly, slightly wine-scented person, but a new person nonetheless. On the way home, you notice things you hadn't before: the smoothness of the cobblestones underfoot, the scent of morning bread wafting from a bakery, the way the pigeons strut like they own every rooftop. It's like seeing Rome through a new lens, a little brighter, a little less clenched jaw. Cassius greets you at the door. Well, you hold up the tooth in a scrap of linen like a victorious gladiator. He whistles low. Did you cry? You point to your bandaged cheek and raise an eyebrow. He hands you a bowl of warm broth without asking. You'll want this, and maybe don't look in the mirror yet. As you sit, sipping carefully, you realize you've joined the ranks of Romans who've had a tooth pulled by a guy who probably also sharpens knives for fun. You lean back, press the cool rim of the bowl to your lips, and smile awkwardly, gap-toothed, but free. And for the first time in days, your mouth is quiet. You sleep that night like a Roman child after a festival, deep, dreamless, and with the faint metallic taste of blood still lingering on your tongue. The city outside hums softly, but inside your little insula apartment, there's only the occasional creak of old beams, the gentle snoring of Cassius, and your own slow breaths. For the first time in what feels like forever, there's no pulsing in your jaw, no fiery nerve reminding you with every swallow that you are, in fact, mortal. When you wake, your mouth feels tender, raw, but calm, the kind of calm that comes only after chaos. You rinse with warm wine as instructed and chew nothing more demanding than mashed lentils. You've survived the worst of it. And yet something curious nags at you. Now that the tooth is gone, you begin to wonder why it hurt so much in the first place. What caused it? Bad bread? Grit in your flour? Or was it, as you overheard a bathhouse philosopher suggest, tiny worms living in your tooth? Yes, toothworms. A theory widely believed throughout much of the ancient world. According to Roman folklore and earlier Mesopotamian traditions, certain types of pain, especially persistent, throbbing aches, were blamed on minuscule worms burrowing into the teeth. You were in pain because some insidious little creature was gnawing away at your enamel like a pest inside the walls. And how did one deal with these toothworms? You listen in on an old woman at the fountain who claims that she once cured her grandson's toothache by spitting into a frog's mouth and whispering a charm backward. The worms don't like being embarrassed, she says, utterly serious. Cassius naturally is delighted by this. You should try it, he says, eyes twinkling. Spit into the next frog, you see. I'll help catch it. You groan. But you do recall that many Roman remedies weren't just physical, they were symbolic. Ritual was medicine. A toothache might be soothed with burnt mouse, yes, but it could also be chased away with prayers, whispered spells, or the strategic burying of small objects under doorsteps. You pass a young mother rubbing her child's cheek with a smooth pebble, while reciting a lullaby that has nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with rhythm, with soothing, with belief. Historians still argue whether these rituals were merely distractions or had genuine psychosomatic effects. But even now, as you press a warm cloth to your healing gum, you wonder, was the relief from the wine, the tongs, or the certainty that the pain would end? Cassius, never one to let a good theory go untested, digs up an old herbal scroll and starts reading aloud possible worm deterrents. He reads with flair, "To banish worms of the tooth, boil the petals of a night-blooming flower under a moonless sky. Stir with silver, swish with olive oil. Do not speak until sunrise." You raise an eyebrow. "Have you ever heard of that working?" "No, but it sounds fantastic," he says. Roman medical texts were filled with such instructions. Not all were about worms. Some blamed toothaches on imbalanced humors, curses, even the influence of certain gods. Pliny the Elder, ever the enthusiast of questionable science, wrote that the touch of a dead man's finger could cure a toothache. He also claimed that catching a toad at night and spitting into its mouth would transfer the pain to the creature. You wonder how many Romans ran around at night with frogs in hand, desperate for relief. It's oddly reassuring to know that for all their aqueducts, colosseums, and philosophical debates, even the Romans faced the same irrational fears and desperate midnight remedies as anyone today with a throbbing molar and no dentist in sight. You spend the afternoon carefully sipping thin broth and reflecting on the strange tapestry of pain and belief. A neighbor tells you she once tied a strand of horsehair around her wrist to draw out gum pain. Another says you must never whistle while chewing or your teeth will crack before Saturn's next orbit. There's something comforting in the absurdity. A community of shared suffering, yes, but also shared theater. Because when the pain is invisible, the performance becomes part of the cure. By evening, you and Cassius sit on the roof, watching the stars emerge one by one. The city's noise below feels distant, softened by height and perspective. You run your tongue gently over the place where the tooth once lived. There's nothing left but a tender hollow and a strange peace. Cassius chews on a roasted fig. "So," he says, "if it was a worm, do you think it crawled out or died in there?" You pause, then nod solemnly. "I like to think it was scared out. By the mouse juice and my scowl." He laughs. You sip the last of your wine, enjoying the absence of pain more than the drink itself. And in that quiet moment, beneath a sky full of gods who probably never flossed, you feel something close to gratitude. Not just for the relief, but for the journey. The ridiculous, messy, strangely communal journey of enduring something so small, and yet so loud. You lean back, stretch your sore jaw, and whisper to no one in particular. "Goodbye, little worm. May you find softer teeth elsewhere." By the next morning, the hole where your tooth used to live feels less like a wound and more like a souvenir, a strange, tender badge of survival. You can run your tongue over the smooth crater without flinching. You almost miss the pain. Almost. Today, Cassius suggests a walk not just through the city, but through ideas. "Let's think bigger," he says, arms flung wide. "Toothaches are not just a Roman problem, my friend. They're universal." You nod, intrigued. And so the two of you begin wandering through the winding alleys of Rome, not just in search of new snacks, always, but to explore how other cultures within the empire deal with dental misery. First stop, the Gallic spice merchant near the cattle market. She's hunched, cheerful, and sorting dried nettle roots when Cassius asks how her people treat tooth pain. She laughs and tells you to chew birch bark or smoke-powdered moss. "Not inhale," she warns. "Just blow the smoke into your mouth. Gently, like you're kissing a god." You both blink. Next, you pass a small Judean pottery stall. The owner overhears your conversation and offers a bit of knowledge passed down from his grandmother. Warm salt water rinses at dawn and dusk, and prayers whispered into cracked clay jars sealed with honey. "Let the words ferment," he says, "and then bury the jar under your bed." Cassius mutters, "Rome sure knows how to complicate a toothache." But the truth is, these remedies aren't so different from your own. The materials change, the symbols vary, but the deep human need for relief and meaning remains the same. You make your way toward the Egyptian quarter, where the streets smell of incense and cumin, and every second doorway seems to host a cat. You find a healer with coal-lined eyes and a tattoo of Horus on his wrist. He listens silently as you describe your extraction and the weeks leading up to it. Then he nods. In Alexandria, he says, we use a salve made from date syrup and myrrh. Very sweet. Very sticky. We believe it traps the pain so it can't move deeper into the soul. Cassius, ever skeptical, raises an eyebrow. Your tooth has a soul? Doesn't yours, the man replies. You walk away slower after that, both of you quietly rolling that thought around your minds like a loose tooth. Historians still argue whether the variety of dental remedies across the Roman Empire reflects true medical diversity or simply a lack of consensus. But in a world stitched together by conquest and commerce, beliefs traveled as fast as spices, and every market stall could be a pharmacy of someone else's homeland. You stop to watch a Syrian storyteller performing in the shade of a public fountain. He tells the tale of a warrior who lost a tooth in battle, and rather than replace it with gold, wore the empty space as a mark of honor. Pain is part of the path to wisdom, he says, and nothing teaches faster than a bite gone wrong. Cassius nods. That's it. I'm writing an epic. The Iliad of the Incisor. You laugh. It still hurts a little, but now the pain feels earned. Back in your own neighborhood, a Numidian metalworker tells you his grandmother swore by the ash of camel dung mixed with ground mint leaves and sesame oil. You pause, impressed. That's a combination you hadn't even imagined. She said it worked, he shrugs. But then again, she also swore by talking to her teeth before bed, thanking them, reminding them to be strong. You wonder if maybe you've taken your teeth for granted. The two of you finish your walk with a shared cup of fig wine, perched on a low wall overlooking the Tiber. The river glides by, old and unbothered. You feel the last days of pain ebbing away like a tide receding from the shore. Cassius nudges you. You've gone philosophical. You shrug. Maybe pain is just a very loud teacher. He considers this. Then my stomach is trying to teach me something urgent. You laugh again, more freely this time. The gap in your teeth makes your smile feel lopsided but honest. The wind picks up. The scent of olive trees drifts in from the hills, mixed with the sharper tang of city life. Rome breathes around you, chaotic, contradictory, endlessly alive. You've walked through cultures, through myths and cures, through every kind of leaf and ash and burnt rodent, and you're still standing. Your tooth is gone, but in its absence you've collected stories, smells, fragments of other lives. There's a kind of quiet beauty in that. You look out over the water and whisper a small thank you, not to the gods, not to the mouse, but to the shared ache that connects you to Gauls, Egyptians, Judeans, and anyone who's ever held a sore jaw and hoped for morning. It's the following afternoon, and Cassius returns home carrying something wrapped in a scroll of recycled parchment. He drops it onto your table with theatrical flair. For you, he announces, a gift. Literature. You squint at the bundle. You got me. Papyrus? Not just any papyrus, he grins. It's satire, theater, drama, all featuring toothaches. You blink slowly. There are plays about toothaches? Oh yes, he says, settling into his favorite cushion like a man who's about to deliver a lecture no one asked for. Toothaches were funny to the Romans, or at least they were funny when someone else had them. You unroll the scroll. It's a copy of a comedy by Plautus, one of Rome's most beloved playwrights. The scene Cassius points to features a grumpy old man who can't chew his food, keeps yelling at servants to cook things softer than clouds, and eventually tries to bribe a street magician to pull the pain from his mouth using a dead fish and some poetry. You start laughing before you even finish the scene. It's strangely comforting. There's something delightfully human about watching ancient characters flail against the same mundane misery that's plagued you for weeks. Cassius begins reciting a few lines with mock gravitas. Omar's god of war and aching jaws. Why must you hammer my molars like galls? You snort and instantly regret it. The jolt of laughter still tugs at the tender spot where your tooth once lived. But the joy outweighs the sting. You discover more references in other texts. Horace jokes about a lover whose kiss is sharper than vinegar on a sore tooth. Marshall pens a poem about a lawyer whose endless arguments are interrupted by molar pain, rendering him suddenly honest. Juvenal, of course, manages to link tooth decay to moral decay, because of course he does. Historians still argue whether these comedic portrayals were meant to mock the suffering of the lower classes, or simply reflect a shared, universal pain that spared no one. After all, in a world with no painkillers, sometimes the only anesthesia is laughter. You and Cassius spend the rest of the afternoon reading aloud from satirical verses and acting out scenes, where pompous nobles try to maintain dignity while spitting out cloves and honey-soaked figs. One particularly absurd poem describes a Roman soldier attempting to go into battle while chewing on a leather strap soaked in donkey milk, hoping it will numb his molars enough to shout for the Republic without wincing. You laugh until tears sting your eyes. And in between the laughter, you notice something profound in art, in comedy, in poetry. Pain becomes less frightening. It becomes something to share, to deflate, to soften with metaphor and meter. Even gladiator graffiti, yes, that exists, contains complaints about sore teeth. A scratched note found on a wall near the Colosseum reads, "I could have won, if not for this cursed jaw." Cassius leans back and sighs. The empire was built on sore backs, strong wine, and bad molars. You toast your cup of watered-down wine to that. Later, you find a child's tablet charcoal scribbles on wax. It's a little rhyme, probably memorized in school. "Tooth, oh tooth, please behave," or down you go into the grave. With mouse ash paste or copper wire, I'll end you like a Roman fire. The rhythm is childish. The thread is very Roman. You sit in silence for a while, letting the humor settle over the deeper truth that story's funny. Silly, exaggerated stories have always been the way people turned suffering into survival. Even in your own pain, you found community. Not just with the Gauls and Egyptians and Rome's neighbors, but with its poets, playwrights, and pranksters. There's something beautiful about being part of that tradition, the long, ridiculous lineage of humans who turned moans into punchlines and made even a molar feel epic. You look over at the scrolls stacked beside the window, lit now by the golden wash of sunset. Tomorrow you'll return them to the library, but tonight they are your balm. Cassius picks up the scroll again. "One more?" he asks. You nod. Carefully. He begins reading in a soft, slow rhythm. His voice becomes part of the room, gentle, amused, familiar. And in that moment, surrounded by parchment, jokes, and the quiet echo of laughter, you feel something rare and precious. Relief. Not just from pain, but from the fear that it was yours alone. The next morning brings a new kind of silence. Not the silence of early dawn or of a city between meals, but a silence inside you, a lack of throbbing, for once. You wake, blink at the beams above your head, and stretch without flinching. Your mouth still feels a little strange. The spot where your tooth used to be now just a soft void, but there's no pain. Just space. You rise slowly, careful not to jostle anything, and splash your face at the water basin. Cassius is already up, humming tunelessly while trying to repair a sandal using fishbone and wax. You make a note to ask about the result later, preferably not while wearing the shoes. After breaking your fast with a cup of warm milk and some soggy bread, your new culinary standard, you sit by the window, letting the breeze drift over your cheek. With the pain behind you, there's only one question left to ask. Did anything actually work? You begin mentally retracing your strange journey: mouse paste, pickled rodent juice, burnt parchment smoke, licorice roots, prayers, incense, vinegar rinses, herbs from half the empire, and of course the tongs of doom. It's a truly Roman catalog of effort. You pull out the old cloth bundle where you stored each Remedies remnants, crumpled leaves, dried powders, and your now calcified compress of barley and onion. Like a museum of desperation. You and Cassius start sorting through it, laughing softly at each item like old friends recounting youthful mistakes. "Remember this one?" you say, holding up a shriveled mint leaf. "The one we had to wave counterclockwise?" Cassius nods. "Didn't that end with you sneezing into the neighbor's soup?" You smile. "Might have helped his toothache." You sit back and consider. So many ingredients, methods, chants, and philosophies. Some probably did something. Others probably not. But they were tried, and that matters. Historians still argue over what actually brought results. Myrrh and cloves have mild numbing effects. Vinegar cleanses wounds. Even powdered charcoal, if not too abrasive, can act as a cleanser. But there's no consensus. Not then, not now. And maybe that's the point. You realize the turning point didn't happen with a miracle poultice or a magical chant. It happened when you acted. When you believed in the possibility of feeling better. When you did something even if it was silly, smelly, or suspiciously rodent-based. Cassius interrupts your musings by throwing a scroll into your lap. "New theory," he says, pointing to a passage he's underlined with ash. "A philosopher says that toothaches are not a physical condition at all, but the mouth's way of warning you that you talk too much nonsense." You chuckle. I am a bit of a poet lately. He grins. Maybe your tooth gave up and walked out. You both laugh, the sound bouncing gently against the clay walls. And it's then, in that stillness, that the real insight arrives, not from a physician or scroll, but from the hush left behind by the ache. Pain is many things: physical, yes, but also emotional. A teacher, a tyrant, a reminder. It strips away your distractions, reduces you to the most basic truth: you want it gone. And once it is gone, you're not the same person anymore. You're softer, sharper, wiser maybe, or at least more cautious with your olives. You press a hand to your jaw. No flare, no wince, just a dull memory. You think of all the advice you were given, some logical, some mystical, some bordering on performance art. And yet together they form a strange kind of map, one part remedy, one part ritual, one part story. You feel oddly grateful to each piece, even the mouse. You rise, open the window wider, and let the late morning air spill into the room. Rome is humming again, vendors shouting, sandals slapping against cobblestones, a child somewhere screaming at a pigeon with great sincerity. Cassius stretches beside you. So what now? You look out at the city, its domes and temples catching the sun like old brass polished new again. I think I'm going to write it down, you say. All of it. He blinks. You? Writing? You nod. Call it a chronicle of cures. Or a eulogy for one very persistent molar. He laughs. I'll fetch more ink. You're going to need a lot. And so you begin. Not a scroll about war or emperors, but about a tooth. Your tooth. And everything it taught you about your body, your city, and the absurd, stubborn magic of trying. You dip your quill in the ink and scrawl the first words. It began with a mouse. Demanesur Bisikinen. As the days pass, your gap-toothed grin becomes a bit of a legend among your neighbors. The boy who fetches water from the public fountain now calls you One-Tooth Maximus. The old woman with the three-legged dog insists on touching your cheek for good luck. Even the fig vendor gives you a slight discount for surviving Roman dentistry, she says with a wink. You don't mind. In fact, you've leaned into it. Because something curious happens when your pain ends. The world becomes fascinating again. You notice things. The way the baker scores his loaves like tiny mosaics. The sound of a broom brushing dust over stone. The sharp scent of mint growing in a crack in the courtyard wall. And yes, the laughter that always seems to bloom after pain recedes, tentative at first, then freer, louder. Cassius rolls his eyes when he sees you sketching tooth diagrams in the margins of a borrowed scroll. You're obsessed, he says. You nod. It's nice to study something I've defeated. He snorts. Tell that to your next incisor. But even he can't deny that you've changed. You're calmer, more focused. You walk the city with a different rhythm now, one that doesn't flinch with every step. And it isn't just your jaw that's healing. It's something deeper, something that reminds you that you're resilient, that you endured the absurd and the ancient, and that in the process, you became part of Rome's quieter history, not written by generals or senators, but by regular people solving regular problems with irregular solutions. You're even invited to a small gathering at the local baths, an informal symposium of sorts, not for scholars or priests, but for citizens with a flair for storytelling. You stand in the steam-filled tepidarium, surrounded by neighbors and strangers, and you share your tale of mice and myrrh, of tongs and toothworms, of gods and garlic and philosophical frogs. They laugh. They wince. Someone claps when you describe the moment your molar surrendered. An old merchant says, "That's what Rome is made of, not marble, but moments like that." You smile awkwardly but proudly. Historians still argue whether ancient Rome was held together by engineering, law, or military strength. But maybe, just maybe, it was this story's passed over bread. Remedies whispered in steam, a shared wince of sympathy and the knowledge that even a common toothache could make you feel human and Roman and real. You and Cassius leave the baths in silence, letting the dust gather around you like warm fabric. As you walk, you pass the house of Faustus, the herbalist. You nod respectfully. His smoke and herbs didn't cure you, but they did something equally important: they eased you. They gave you the hope that pain had an end. Later, back in your apartment, you sit down to finish the scroll you've been working on. Your handwriting is better now, slower, more thoughtful. You're not in a rush anymore. Yuri Ananturuman. You write. It is no small thing to survive one's own mouth. You pause, then underline it. Outside, the lamps flicker to life, and the city begins its evening song vendors. Closing stalls, cats slipping through alleys, lovers arguing about olives in the street. Rome breathes. And you, for once, don't flinch. And now, as the oil lamp burns low and the night stretches out like a quiet road, you let yourself lean back. The city fades. The sounds soften, just the hush of a breeze through clay tiles. The distant splash of water from a worn fountain, the slow creak of your neighbor's shutters closing. Your jaw no longer aches. Your body no longer tenses at every movement. What remains is a gentle stillness. You remember each part of the journey not with stress, but with that odd fondness that follows hard-earned relief. The smell of time, the hiss of steam in the baths, the ridiculous twine florists used to steady your head. All of it now tucked into the folds of your memory like pressed herbs in a drawer. There is no need to rush anymore. No need to search for mice or whisper to frogs or pray to obscure household gods. Tonight there is only warmth, the soft pulse of your breath, and the quiet victory of a body that mended itself slowly, awkwardly, stubbornly, just like Rome does over and over again. You pull the linen closer to your shoulders. Your breathing deepens. The window stirs gently. Somewhere, a cat pads across a rooftop and curls beside a chimney, as if the city itself has decided to sleep. So close your eyes. Let the past fall quiet. Let the ache dissolve and drift, because you've earned it. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow you can chew on the good side.